Today we are going to talk about some new Max for Live devices that I have made to do various things. To start with, I just want to talk about a Max for Live device that I have shared with you guys before, which was called the TFP Random On Off. And what that was doing was that every time it receives a MIDI note, it checks this probability. So it's by default set to 50%. And you can map this to anything, and then it would either turn it on and off. So here you set how likely it is to be on and off. So you can see it's being triggered. I've got just a little sequencer running here, but you could just as well just use your MIDI keyboard, and every time you press a key, it would sort of trigger this. There are a couple of problems with this device. So I'm just gonna, just for the sake of argument, I'm gonna map that. Actually, let's just add a delay to this chain so we've got an effect or something. So now if I map this device to the on-off of this delay, you can see sometimes it's off and sometimes it's on. The first very obvious problem is that when you've mapped it to something, in most cases, I use this for turning devices on and off. And therefore, all of these buttons would say device on, and that becomes really useless, especially if you have a lot of these and you worked on the project and you open it up again and all of them just say device on, and you can't remember which one is mapped to what. The other issue, there was a bug with this one. I don't know if you ever used it and you came across it, but it's basically, if you started shuffling your channels around here, without sort of silently, it still looks right here, but it actually loses its mapping sometimes. And that could be really tricky. And especially if it only said device on and you didn't know what it was mapped to, and you just realized that all of a sudden it just sounds different. So it was a bit rubbish, quite frankly. So I have remade this device. I have made it a little bit simpler. So I got the TFP Random 2. As you see, it's much smaller now. The other one had a whole bunch of channels, so you could use one device to map, was it, I don't know, 6 or 7 different things. This is only doing one, but you can obviously have multiple instances, so you can have loads of these if you want to. The difference here is, so if I map this to that, for example, you get a bit more information what it's actually mapped to, and that makes it life a lot easier if you need to backtrack this. And also the bug, I hope, is gone. It should be gone now. I haven't experienced it. So, but then otherwise it works in the same way. You can set the probability on how likely it is either to be on or off. And it can become quite a useful device if you just, let's say, just for fun, we just do a few delays with different delay times in a row. We'll do a really short one, and then we can do a really long one, and then we can just add a few more of these. So every time it receives a MIDI note, it triggers this. So we just have a chain of different delay times here. So you get a sort of strange multi-tap delay. But as the delays will turn on and off randomly, you will get sort of a different effect on each key press almost. So you can set these to quite unlikely, all of them, so we get. Okay, so I think you get the idea of that. And obviously you don't have to just have delays. You can have lots of other things that you turn on and off. Or you can turn channels on and off here and things just to to add some more random flavor to your music. So when I was doing this, I just started thinking about, like, in Eurorack, I don't know if you're familiar with that. You, like in simple terms, you have two different types of signal, I suppose. You might have heard of CV and gate, or gate sometimes triggers. They're, well, in a way, they're the same type of. No, I'm not going to go into that detail. Let's just see them as two different things. CV, that could be different types of voltages that you send through. So that could be, for example, you want to send it to a filter, and if it's a low voltage, the cut off, let's say, would be almost closed, and then you can open it up if you send it to high voltage. It's the same actually if you have a sort of a keyboard plug-in, you send the CV to change the pitch. So the higher the key, the higher the pitch would be, for example. Whereas gate is either just on and off. And you can send that, it's almost like you can send it a gate or a trigger to something as if you're almost like pressing a button with your finger, but you can sort of automate that a bit. So you sort of send gates here and there to sort of, or triggers for it to do different things. It's quite a useful thing, actually. And I'm going to see if I can come up with a reason why I want to do that here now. I was doing something earlier and it felt really good. So that when you press a key, it creates a trigger, but you can trigger something else in a different channel. So for example, let's do that. Yes. Okay. So let's do this. Let's just remove some of these silly delays. There's just too many of them now, I think. That's not the greatest example. Let's remove some of those. And let's use, okay, so I can take a sequencer, for example. This is a modified version of the step sequencer, which is part of the big three. But this one takes, if you send some MIDI notes to it, the sequence will progress. So let's do, I'm just going to come up with a silly pattern here. So you can see how this is progressing based on the pattern I did here. So if I take some out, but now what we can do, because this my home-baked version of this big three step sequencer allows you to actually MIDI map the random, the randomizing this sequencer. So we can actually do something like, actually we do this sequencer a bit, we just put some more notes in. Actually set, I think, the probabilities. So it's going to repeat the same melody over and over again now. So let's say we just take a new channel and then we just come up with we just put some MIDI notes in, like that. Not so many. We can even make this sequence a bit longer maybe. And then we're going to take this new MIDI device, which is TFP. Am I in the right place? Yes. TFP trigger. So rather than, it's very similar to the random one. The only difference is that it's not checking the probability and if it's going to turn it on and off. It's just like as soon as it receives a MIDI note, I'm just going to map that to. You can obviously turn things on and off by doing this, but I'm going to map it to the random, randomizing the filter. So if we just run these two lanes now. So you can see here it's sort of changing the melody every so often. You see here it receives the, like every time like it plays one of these notes, it will just send that trigger out. Oh, what am I doing? There we are. So quite a useful tool to turn things on and off, or if you have other things where you literally want to press a button to just like make something happen. So when I was doing that, this is obviously sending a trigger, and then I did another variation on that, which is toggle, which works pretty much in the same way as the trigger, but if it's on, it turns it off. If it's off, it turns it on. So So here it's just like I've added this little, it's not a LED, it's just like a dot, I suppose, indicating whether what the state is, like if it is on or off. So they were just a bunch of little things that I wanted to share in this video, which is really helpful tools if you want to make some event-based things in Ableton. I am sure you will see these in a lot of the coming videos. If you would like to sponsor me on Patreon and the stuff that I do, please check out the link in the description. Even if you just want to grab these devices and just join for a month and then bugger off, I would be sad, but also that would be, if that's what you want to do, that's okay. That's okay. If you just want to go do a one-off, that's okay too. Every little helps. Also, can't remember if I mentioned that in the beginning of the video, I've also set up a Discord server. I'm all quite new to that, so I don't know how it all works quite yet, but I'm generally sort of on there. I haven't invited anyone to it yet, so you might be the first one. I'll put a link in the description if you just want to have a chat about music or what I do, or other like-minded people want to talk about experimental electronic music. I suggest that you join in. I also want to talk about the video that I'm making for next weekend. That is also a recommendation. Did I say that, by the way? The recommendation for setting up the Discord server was someone putting that in the comments for another video. And so it's worthwhile. So if that's what you want to happen. So I'm going to notify him or her. I can't remember who that was. Likewise, next week's video is going to be about melody making, which was another thing that someone suggested during the week that they were curious about. I'm a little bit terrified, I have to say, because melodic stuff, I find it hard. I find it difficult. But on the other hand, in my process of just figuring out music making, I have come across or learned one or two things that I would be more than happy to share with you guys. Little techniques that I use, how to create melodies. I'm gonna ponder on that one a little bit, but that's my intention for next week's video. So if you're into melodies, also if you have any links to the music that you make, or like you want to share something, or if you found something, please put that in the comments. Thank you very much. Goodbye for this week.